Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us today as we talk a little bit about Sumo Logic's better log analytics for faster troubleshooting and less stressed engineers. Joining us today, a panel of folks and professionals, Manas Sharma, a product manager here at Sumo Logic, and Rachel Stevens, industry analyst at Redmonk. Welcome, Manas and Rachel. Glad to have you here with us today. Hope everything is well. And I'm your host, Mike Baldani. I'm a product marketing person here at Sumo Logic. When we talk about log analytics, particularly some of the challenges and best practices, we really want to talk about and let you take away three key items during our discussion today or after our discussion today. One is, just how to manage that huge volume of cellular log data that's being collected and stored within your organization. Secondly is just the accuracy of log analytics and why it's essential for fast troubleshooting and issue resolution. And then thirdly, how we can help empower engineers to keep those applications reliable and secure with less stress on your workers and your engineers. Before we get really into the content, I always like to talk about the very high level mandates that are happening across companies today. And it's all about keeping systems and digital apps reliable and secure. And when you look at how to do it, it's really done three ways, right? It's around ensuring those applications are reliable. It's keeping those applications and systems secure and protected against modern threats. And then third, it's gaining better insights into your cloud infrastructures to ensure that the capacity is meeting the load being demanded on it based on usage. So for a quick chart, we recently ran a survey of our own customers last month around log management, log analytics, and we got some interesting results, right? When you look at the results here, over 50% of the folks responded that the lack of a centralized, secure, and compliant way of storing log data, machine data was extremely important to them and a big challenge. And it was hard to manage and scale up and down log management storage and infrastructure, particularly for on-prem organizations. And then also just down at the bottom there, 45% mentioned the lack of ability to drill down and query log data to get those log analytics, to get those analytics and insights for faster troubleshooting, right? And I just want to mention, this was a user evidence survey that was conducted by Sumo Logic, where we had 146 responders. So a good sample set based on these results. So let's get right into it. Rachel, being an industry analyst for Redmonk, you talk to a lot of folks out in the market. What are some of the big challenges that you're hearing around managing those huge volumes of log data today?
I think there's kind of two angles to this question that we see. And one is like the state of the environments themselves. And then there's kind of the challenges that are related specifically to logs. So in regards to the kind of state of application environments today, we see heterogeneous environments. You have this mix of on-cloud and prem, and we have SaaS services thrown in there. And all of these environments are increasingly distributed. And they're composed of first and third-party services. And so what this means then is you have a system, you may or may not have access to the system in which your code is running, and you have a system that is increasingly distributed and hard to hold in your head. So you kind of think about the Woods theorem here, where it's as the complexity of the system increases, the accuracy of any single agent, an agent in this case would be a person, any person operating within the systems, their own model of the system decreases rapidly. And that means we can't model the systems in our head. We have to rely on our tools when we're working in these distributed environments. And so it creates a challenge for these teams. And you talked about the challenges of scale. You talked about the challenges of making sure that we can debug and understand these things. And so we have to understand the context of what's happening in our systems from our tools. And that's where logs come in. The challenge of logs for a lot of teams and a lot of people is kind of the too much of a good thing challenge, where you have the volume challenge of trying to find that needle in a haystack, making sure that you have figured out that balance between having relevant information in your logs, but not having your logs be too verbose, and trying to find that balance of not having things be costly or slow, which can happen sometimes in log things if you're logging everything. And then always the classic challenge of just regex. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of potential problems that people encounter as they're trying to figure out how to understand their systems. And so people are really grappling with how do I understand my systems and how do I make my logs work for me?
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. And Manas, I want to just go to you again since you're a product manager within Sumo Logic, really focused on log management, log analytics. You saw some of the results of that survey. What other things are you hearing? Does that resonate with you based on the customers you're hearing? But are there other things that you're hearing from customers that are big challenges just around managing all that data for logs?
Thanks, Michael. I'd like to basically pick on some of the key challenges that you highlighted that our customers called out, and then expand on it, because that is something that we've been continuing to hear from our customers. And then the expansion would be primarily from a challenge perspective. Different organizations are at different stages of their cloud journey, right? And that actually leads to what Rachel was describing in terms of organizations seeing a mix of heterogeneous and homogeneous data, which results in throwing up varied data formats, some structured, unstructured data, and customers having to manage all of those data sources while still continuing to drive the application service evolution, right? And so that is one of the key challenges that we are hearing from customers in terms of, hey, how can Sumo be an effective partner for us in this journey as we move away from on-prem to cloud? And in the context of cloud, there are quite a few ephemeral deployments as well. So how can Sumo be an effective partner on that front? And secondly, from the perspective of unlocking more value with the data, I think there's a growing realization that the same data powers both the security and observability operations, and then consequently, as customers are becoming more and more familiar and set with their operational models, it's around how they can optimize having these duplicate data sources and rely on one single platform to basically drive both the security and observability side of the use cases. So again, customers coming back saying, hey, how can Sumo facilitate more of this value unlocking with all the data I have? And then lastly, as more and more data is coming into the platform, I think budgets are not growing at the same speed. So there's a growing ask in terms of helping aggregate and then managing all of the data while still keeping the costs contained. So these are broadly the three challenges, and they actually are resonating with what we've heard from customers and are at the root of some of the key challenges that customers are facing.
Awesome. Thank you, Manas. So let's get to the second question. So I'll go back to Rachel first. Again, from a market perspective, first of all, I think you covered it, right? Why are logs important, right? It is kind of the footprint, right? When engineers are coding and releasing features, it really helps them understand what's happening if they need to go back and debug or find an issue, right? Find that needle in the haystack, right? So, but what are to find that needle in the haystack, right? What are some of the good practices around getting accurate log analytics for really fast troubleshooting, right? Because we know that being efficient in getting those analytics, so first of all, finding that data, getting the analytics helps kind of reduce that cognitive load on those engineers, right? We're kind of reducing that stress and that burden. So what are some of those good practices that folks should be thinking about putting in place to get those great log analytics?
Yeah, so I want to start by just really reiterating what Manas said there, is that we've seen this cultural shift where more and more teams are relying on logs in some way, shape, or form. And this includes, you have your operations teams, you have your security teams like Manas talked about, and you have your developer teams, where we have this cultural shift that's happened in the industry where we frequently are asking developers to own their code beyond just writing it. And we've kind of broken down these silos between the creation of the code and the running of the code. And we've had this DevOps kind of movement throughout the organization. And in this world, we've shifted responsibility over to the developers, and we have to give developers tools in order to actually effectively understand. And Mike, you were talking about the importance of debugging. And so we have to give debugging tools. We have these incredibly valuable information that can be stored in our logs, and we have to make sure that we can expose it to our developers kind of with the correct context at the right time. Because like done poorly, logs can be like a painful last resort for developers, like digging through and writing irregular expressions and really trying to figure out, like kind of staring at the graph and like eyeballing and it's like, oh, it looks like there's a spike there. I wonder if I can go find something. But like, so we have to empower our teams to understand their systems. And there's a few things that we can do to help teams do that. So like one of them, Manas was talking earlier about like structured versus unstructured logs. Structuring logs, I think, is like if you can do it. I know not everything can end up in a structured state, but structuring logs kind of in like a JSON or key value pair format can really be helpful both for people and machines. Like you can make sure that you don't impact downstream dependencies when you change things. You can make it more readable. You have easier search capabilities. So that can be really important. Centralizing your log data into something like a log management tool can be really great because it can enrich your log files and give you additional information and insight. It can help you with security, which is important. And I think the security aspect that Manas talked about is great. One, in that you can understand what's happening in your systems and have kind of that security angle. And also the security of your logs themselves is important because one of the things that you want is to have really rich data in your logs. So you want to have some of those kind of high cardinality things that are hard to have as a metric. You want to be able to have that in your log payload somewhere so that you can be like, oh, look, a client ID, something like this. So you can kind of have these great things. But some of that information is going to be sensitive information. And so you have to make sure that you understand the security of your log system as well, because it can be an attack surface as well. I mean, you have to make sure that you're treating your logs and the sensitive data that may potentially be in there with care. And then the final one is just having some kind of strategy around what you log. So kind of thinking about what you're doing, how long you're retaining it, what needs to go where, who has access to things like, and that's something, again, that a centralized strategy can help you with. So that's kind of what I was thinking there, but I would love to hear Manas' thoughts.
Yeah, Manas, why don't you give your perspective again? We talked to a lot of our customers, and we know that a lot of our customers start at the logs before they go to a full stack observability or security. And the logs are the foundation. So what are you hearing from them? Like, how are they using logs? What are they doing? And how are they working with us to get those really good insights from log analytics?
Yeah, I think I'd echo everything that Rachel called out from customers looking at a centralized log management policy and looking to, centralize their logs and driving insights. And while the overall Sumo Logic platform does provide those capabilities, which any administrator can go ahead, stitch together a effective log management policy, there are a few aspects that are worth highlighting, right? And something that I'd like to call attention to. One, in terms of all of the configurability that is available within Sumo Logic from a collection policies perspective, helping customers filter out the data, identify sensitive data, as well as hash or mask it. Those are some of the best practices that we've seen customers leverage. And as much as our administrators at our customer org using Sumo Logic would absolutely not want to have all of that sensitive data in, there are certain scenarios where some of the data leaks in for varied reasons. And so having the platform that can provide the right set of tools so that as these sort of scenarios are identified, alerted, customers can, or administrators and users can go in and set up those right policies, hash or mask out the data, and in some cases, hide out the data from an auditing and compliance perspective, helps them kind of be in the compliance zone. From an organization data perspective, I think this is one of those extremely challenging situations where in any customer's journey, as they bring in data, one, they bring in all of the data into the SmoothLogic platform, and then there is always this constant struggle in terms of, hey, how do I organize my data? How do I visualize it more effectively? And there, some of our data organization strategies, be it by ways of metadata, where again, based on the source host that a particular data has been ingested in, or based on a grouping of a certain set of source hosts, helps customers, one, organize the data. There are at a higher level, as customers look to aggregate the data by applications, services, or maybe some other construct that works within their team. We've seen them leverage the partitions capabilities, and even from a partitions perspective, based on the value that they're looking to drive from the data, there are all of these tiers that are offered within the within the product, from a continuous, frequent, and infrequent perspective, that again customers have found extremely helpful in terms of bringing in high sensitive data into continuous, which they're going to query a lot, and then some of the lower value data more into the infrequent, right? And then another key capability that helps customers kind of make sense of their structured and unstructured data is with what we have with capabilities called fields and FERs, where there is a normalization of the data that happens. If it is unstructured, there is more normalization, versus if it is structured, it is auto-parsed and made available for faster querying, for easier querying as well. And that in itself unlocks the capabilities for users to drive more and more value out of it. Lastly, the standard suite of capabilities offered by the search query language, as well as the powerful operators, helps users a lot. But in terms of a good practice, we've seen a lot of these organizations standardize around search templates, which they can go out and share it with their wider teams, basically lock down on a particular query, so that they can minimize the wider org having to become more power users, and there could be a few users who can then drive a lot of these value enrichments as well as data insights for the wider org. So those are kind of the three key recommendations that, at least from a product side, I'd have based on what I've heard from our customers using our product.
Yeah. So Manas, I know the screenshot here is around collection. Is there anything else you want to mention here on a collection, or do you want to move to the logs slideshot?
Yeah, I think on the collections, what is worth highlighting is the collection policies from the perspective of the masking, hashing, again, so that any sort of context around the data can be automatically identified and appropriately treated. And then as we go into the next slide, it's primarily around the normalization of the data using FERs, as well as better data organization through the partitions that I was calling out earlier. If you go to the next slide.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, and this is primarily around how customers can organize search templates. This is just a standard query, and the power of the query language is a lot. So what in effect I was trying to convey through this screenshot was that customers, or rather administrators, can set up search templates that could benefit the wider org, and this could definitely help some of the new users as they come into the org and they're learning not just the development tools and those practices, but they also have to learn additional tool like Sumo in terms of helping them with their day-to-day operations. And content like this helps these users jumpstart in terms of trying to drive value from the logs and can start being more productive in the logs.
Okay.
this is again one of those capabilities around alerting and monitoring, which we've heard users drive value from, primarily from the perspective of not having all of the data and actually having the data drive insights from basically what you can do through the monitors is make a call out to a particular criteria that administrators, developers, security ops would like to be alerted on. And as soon as that condition is triggered, the administrator gets a notification, and along with the notification, if you go to the next slide, there is an alert response, which provides more detailed information in terms of the context of the particular event and how users can again get a quick start in terms of troubleshooting and identifying the root cause of the issue.
Awesome. Thanks, Manas. I really like the insight into how Sumo Logic can help, right? Between the collection, the logs, the monitoring, and the alerts. Again, an efficient way of leveraging that data, getting the right analytics to these engineers so that they can effectively troubleshoot quickly and not produce a lot of stress on their end, right? And getting that work done so that they can go back to what they've been doing. Rachel, when we talk about troubleshooting and issue resolution, what are some of the use cases that you've been hearing out in the market that engineers are leveraging log analytics for? Again, troubleshooting, right, is a very broad word, right? I wonder if you could kind of just zero in on some very specific use cases, and it can be reliability or security or other use cases that you're hearing as well, like business impact.
Yeah. So I think I love the phrase that like every dashboard is like a history of something that has gone wrong in the past. So you have this idea of using dashboards to kind of help flag that there is a metric or there's an error, there's a warning, there's an exceptional situation happening. You see your dashboard spike, and you can use your logs then to go in and investigate, get more detailed information around what's happening. I think that's a really common use case for logs. I also think that one of the things that I like for logs is that the unknown, like exploring your system, doing the detective work to try to figure out what's happening. And I think that logs play a really crucial role in incident response from that perspective. So that you kind of have there are these known issues, and we can understand what's happening in our dashboards. But I also think logs are really great for these, let's figure out, let's dive in deep, let's understand our system, let's explore what's happening. And so I think that there's kind of a couple of different ways that logs get used in kind of the incident response angle. And then as we've kind of alluded to many times throughout this, is they're really crucial for security and auditing. So trying to understand what's happening in our system, who has access to our system, all of these things. And so I think those are a few main use cases that I think are particularly relevant today. And the areas that we really focus on at RedMonk is we focus a lot on kind of the developer and the practitioner of people who are kind of hands-on the code, hands-on the system. And I think the log use case is really crucial for them to try to understand what's happening in our system, because we have, as we said, shifted to this world where developers need to understand their code. And one of the ways that they can do that is by having the information available to them and the context of their systems available to them. So I think that's really the crucial thing.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. And before I hand it over to Manas to do a demo to really take a good look on Sumo Logic's log analytics, I want to ask you, Rachel, one other question. When you look at what are folks really looking for from a log analytics solution, right? What are they, what do you can you tell us what they're looking for in a provider?
Yeah. Well, I think like the observability market, like broadly speaking, has a lot of attention on it these days. And I think there's a lot of people who are hyping it in a way that sometimes feels, I feel like, I guess what I'm saying is like observability is not the end goal. Like observability should be in service of kind of broader goals like system reliability and like improving the user experience, or security and preventing data breaches, or improving the decision making of our teams. Like the goal of this data is not to just like have access to this data, but it all needs to be in service of like these bigger business goals. And so I think part of what users are looking for then are systems that can help them with those broader goals. So using our data to funnel kind of better insights, more actionable insights at the correct time. And honestly, at like a cost and price point that doesn't break the bank, because logging can be really expensive when you have all of your various systems outputting data and trying to figure out how much of that data you need to retain, where it's all going, all of these things. So that's part of it. I think the world is increasingly relying on service as a solution, like service providers, rather than having to host and manage themselves. We call it kind of this appetite for managed services is very real. So there are definitely organizations that want that control, that want to be able to run it themselves in their firewall. There's also a lot of organizations that just don't want the headache of that. So I think that is one of the things that we watch with interest. And we do see this growing desire for kind of cloud-based services. As we talked before, broad user bases. So you have developer teams, operations teams, security teams. So a product that is intuitive to various constituencies within the org is another thing that's going to be important. So all of these things come together in a way that is like, it can be a little bit of a challenge, I think, sometimes to try to balance all of these things. But those are the things that I think that a lot of organizations are searching for as they try to figure out how to have their logs under control.
Fantastic.
I want to kind of expand on the previous question, Mike, that you were asking Rachel about, and give the Sumo Logic view on it in terms of how we look at log analytics. Like, and absolutely, it's driving all of those goals that Rachel called out, from a cost observability, driving value in service of a broader goal, and not necessarily looking to just bring in all of the data, both on the observability and security side. And consequently, if you boil all of this down in terms of what is required from the platform, we look at it in terms of, from a log analytics perspective, these following key capabilities. One, for us from Sumo Logic perspective, to help customers both instrument and collect their data. And again, I'd like to highlight the capabilities that we have with the collection, specifically, again, to bring in a varied set of sources on-prem as well as on the cloud. And more recently, with the opening up of the Open Telemetry Collector and our standard distro, for us to be able to be, again, be at the edge in terms of any new sources, any standardization that we're seeing out in terms of customers sending out logs. And from that perspective, collection being one of those key places where customers can try and segregate data, be more sensitive to data. There are a host of policies that can be applied at the collection level, primarily some that I already called out from the perspective of masking or hashing out sensitive information. There's additional aspects in terms of customers being able to, for their specific logs, and if it happens to be in the context of unstructured data, be able to parse it better at the source, so that, again, drive that normalization of data, so that the time to value with the logs, when users really want to, is quick and fast, right? So those are all the capabilities that we are trying to bring to the edge as we collect all of the data. And then in addition, again, we've heard of this from quite a few customers, where they're looking at basically having additional or they as part of their broader log management pipeline and thoughts around that. They prefer on having a third-party source where they end up storing all of their data. And again, Sumo can be an effective facilitator in that, by helping customers archive data right at the source, not having to bring it all the way in and and get impacted by any sort of latency that this might introduce on the data, because from the perspective of what they're looking to do, latencies are also a consideration. So participating in that sort of a creation of data pipeline for, data life cycle for customers, where they're looking at storing data externally as well. Ideally, customers should not need to with the overall data tiering policies, but then again, different organizations and their different goals. So Sumo continues to can partner with all of those needs. Subsequently, the second step in terms of key log management capabilities is primarily for customers to be able to centralize and index. Again, organize the data, drive more value, so that customers can then, when they get to the value derivation stage, be able to drive more value. And there, the capabilities that I had earlier called out around field extraction rules, the fields per se, helping normalize data, creating materialized views for these unstructured data, and bringing in structured data and storing them in indexes, partitions, or scheduled views to drive all of those subsequent use cases. And then we move on to the third key stage from a log analytics perspective, which is capabilities for search, query, and analyze. And here, Sumo, with its powerful query language, can provide the right sort of insights to drive any sort of troubleshooting workflow, as well as provide the right visualization that can instantaneously help users make sense of the data, and additionally help customers to go ahead and create dashboards from the perspective of any sort of operations workflow or anything else that they'd like to do. And then as we move on further, another key capability in terms of alerting and monitoring, where with a query that already has been created, customers could very simplistically go ahead and create a monitor that could help them again be alerted based on a condition, as I had called out, and be also able to visualize in terms of, hey, what is the trend, and then set up those alerts automatically. And as soon as the alerts are set up, as and when a particular alert fires, while one part of the practice might be to just notify the customers from a Sumo perspective in terms of trying more in service of that end goal, trying to drive SLOs, what we've also built out is clear reports in the context of each one of those events, which can jumpstart any sort of either an investigation or basically be able to identify the next steps in terms of root causing. Lastly, the monitor and dashboard capabilities within Sumo Logic, they can be leveraged to drive business value, product adoption value, as well as product details, and they can be leveraged, as we've kind of shown out here in the context of a sample app. They can be leveraged to understand the application status, the website status, and so on. And that can be further leveraged from an ops perspective to identify the broader problem areas. And then with the other capabilities, both from an alert perspective as well as the report, be able to pinpoint the issue, the time that issue occurred, and be able to take corrective actions accordingly. So therein lies the capability of the platform, primarily from a logs perspective. And if I were to add that it's not just logs that Sumo Logic supports, but with additional data and context like metrics and traces, there is more and more enrichment to all of the context of the events, which is going to benefit users from the perspective.
Manas, I'll probably hand it off to you as well. But, one listener came in and just, is log analytics the easiest way to begin for my company's observability or security monitoring practice? So, we talked about logs, we talked about log analytics. We typically know that's the foundation for reliability and security, but is it the easiest place to start? So Rachel, I'll start with you. Oh, you're on mute.
Totally on mute. Sorry.
Rachel,
how about that?
You're on mute.
Is that better? Sorry, everybody. Part of my job as an analyst is to say it depends a lot. And so I guess part of this answer is going to start with like, it depends on where you're at and what kind of, as Manas alluded to earlier, and kind of where you are in your journey. I'm guessing that you probably have systems that are logging things already. And so organizing and understanding those logs is a really great place to kind of put your efforts behind if you're still getting started. I think one of the things that can be really helpful, and we're kind of talking about, is like, can you use your logs to help you craft like the metrics that you need to be tracking? Because metrics can be expensive as well. Because like I was talking about before, they're high cardinality, so you have to be kind of careful around which metrics you choose to track and alert on. And so I think using your logs to kind of help build up which metrics are the most important ones for your organization, kind of, and you can kind of use those two in tandem. And then, as Manas was talking about, kind of the logs, metrics, traces all together to create the context. So like in an ideal world, you'd get to a place where you can use all three of these systems together to create context, but logs is a great foundation for all of them.
Cool. Manas, how about your perspective?
Oh, I absolutely feel that logs is the foundational piece. Like I go recollect my days as a developer, and logs was one of those places that I would immediately tail, grep, and root cause or find the problem, right? And so I definitely think in any sort of an observability pyramid, logs is right at the fundamental core in terms of driving any observability. Metrics and traces absolutely add on value and context. But if you are looking to troubleshoot, root cause, identify what is causing a particular event, logs is at the core of it. And so it's better to start right with the base and then kind of build your way up as you go.
Nice. Excellent. Thanks, Manas. So Rachel, another question that came in more about, because I think during the discussion, you talked about, some of this log information, to make it effective, you may have sensitive information data in those logs, right? So, and this listener is asking, do I really need to worry about data security? In other words, securing that data. But particularly if I'm looking at a cloud-based or a SaaS log solution, or should I just focus on on-prem solution, right? So what are your thoughts there?
And trying to parse what they're saying, I think the answer is that you should care about the data security regardless of where it lies. I think is the answer there. I think, and I'm going to let Manas maybe give more details around like masking and hashing, but I think it's really important to make sure that you are treating personally identifiable information with care, regardless of where the data resides. And I think that's where I'd start. And so whether or not it's cloud versus on-prem, I would worry less. And I would say it matters in both scenarios.
Cool. Manas, you want to give your point of view?
Oh, absolutely. I think Rachel hit it spot on. I think customers should demand absolute security, irrespective of where the data is. I think the value that a cloud-based solution can provide is across all of the logs from varied sources. Cloud-based solution can be that aggregator that can help provide insights in terms of any sort of threats that they are seeing, not just from traffic coming into their environment, but even assets that are hosted on the cloud. And I think today almost every organization has some assets hosted in the cloud, so they definitely need that bit. And hence I'd personally recommend going down the path of a cloud-based SaaS log solution.
Cool. Thanks, Manas. And I'll take the next question, which kind of leads right into this, and it's very specific to Sumo Logic's platform around the security attestations and certifications. And really, when you look at Sumo Logic, it is a cloud SaaS-based solution, but we are FedRAMP. We are certified for HIPAA. SOC 2, PCI, all those data security certifications and attestations have been achieved and maintained for Sumo Logic Cloud Platform. Again, that was very specific. And then the last question here, and Manas, I'll focus. This is really for you. Can Sumo Logic's log analytics solution collect data across a mix of cloud and on-prem environments?
Yes, and I think I touched this briefly during the demo, but absolutely, with a combination of both the installed as well as the cloud collector, data from any source, whether be it on the cloud or on-prem, can be ingested into the Sumo Logic platform. So work seamlessly.
Awesome. Very good. Those are all the questions that came in so far. If others come in, I'll get them out to the group and we will answer them and get them back out to our audience. But again, Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. It was great discussion. Loved having your point of view from the market. And Manas, you're in this every day in the trenches with Sumo Logic and log analytics and solving customer problems around log data, right? So again, appreciate your time as well. Love the discussion. So I hope the two of you have a great day. And to our audience as well, have a great day or a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Rachel.